So this is this thing we do. We're these two guys who are sick and tired of the core principles of this country, the mythology that we've been supporting for years and generations, and we would like to see things change drastically. And it's from a leftist perspective. We're the Leftist Lens. I'm James.
And I'm Matt, and we talk about things that have happened in the last week, or in the case of our top story, what happened just a little bit ago, a few minutes ago.
Yeah, let's lead in with that. What happened, Matthew?
So this happened. We're recording this on July 13th, Saturday. You're listening to this at some point in the future, so you probably know more about this than we do at this moment. But just a little bit ago, while Trump was at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, some loud pops were heard. That's what the ABC News was calling it. And Trump was tackled by Secret Service and rushed off the stage. What we saw, though, with the slow-mo video after the media broke it down a little bit, was right before the Secret Service grabbed him, he reached up with his right hand and grabbed his right ear. And then later, when they got him up off the ground and were getting him off a stage, his right ear was quite bloody. So it seems like he may have been grazed by a bullet, allegedly, in my opinion.
I'm gonna tread very lightly on this one because my visceral sort of reaction is would probably not be received well. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't give two fucks about whether or not he was injured, shot, hurt, whatever. Any misery and pain that can come his way is a good thing for humanity as a whole. And that's as much as I'm going to say about it, but we will keep watching this because, yeah, it's probably important.
I want Trump to die in prison. I don't want him to get out of that.
Oh, so, yeah, and I don't want him to.
That's how I feel about this.
Yeah, and for him to be martyred in a political rally is really a terrible, terrible option.
Yes. Well, I will say that when he was rushed off stage, he was pumping his fists and all that. So he does not appear to be seriously injured. And you can be certain he's going to raise millions of dollars off of this. And quite frankly, this is probably going to get him some votes. And
I mean, seriously, though, do you think there's somebody who isn't going to vote for Trump that is now going to vote for Trump? And for this reason or any other reason, I don't know.
I'm sure there are some out there. I'm sure there are.
Yeah. I just wonder who that person is. That's my curiosity.
I don't know, but they're on crypto Twitter. I can tell you that, because crypto Twitter is going nuts talking about their president and how strong he is and all that bullshit.
Good Lord.
I have a hard time being in crypto since the vast majority of people are Trumpers. Ugh. But anyway.
So yeah, that is the top story at this hour. And
yeah, that just happened. We don't know that much. This will get posted on all the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Spotify on Monday, and sometime around then on YouTube also if you want visual enhancements. So by then you'll know more about this than we do right at this moment, but that's what we know.
Yeah, I'm checking the Google News feed to see if anything's been updated. He's definitely bleeding. Wall Street Journal is a paywall and they can suck my dick for that reason. Yeah, nothing new on this, so we'll just keep watching it as we record. There may be something more to report on it by the time we get to the end of our broadcast here.
All right, so that was added very quickly as our lead thing we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to mention some of the other things we're going to talk about in case so people can stay till the end. We're going to talk about the articles of impeachment that AOC brought against 2 Supreme Court justices. We're going to talk a little bit about Israel and Gaza. We're going to talk about Biden. I had a little sit down with a local politician here in Pennsylvania that's running for the Pennsylvania State Senate. I'm going to talk about what I talked to him about and what he said. And we're going to update you on Karen Reed and the Alec Baldwin case. I am going to tie those in to the dystopian world we live in today. We're not just doing this to entertain you. There is a tie-in that I'm going to bring.
The European elections too. You missed that. We're going to talk about that.
European elections that continued. Those are our topics. All right, James.
All right. So articles of impeachment were introduced by, was it just Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or was anybody else co-sponsoring this?
Anything I've seen, it was just her. But obviously this is pointless. It's not going to get out of the House. There's zero chance of it getting out of the House.
Yeah.
But it's symbolic. But what I found interesting is the articles of impeachment are about them not recusing themselves on cases that were about, well, in the case of Clarence Thomas, about his wife and her support of the J6 insurrection. And Alito, I don't know what he was supposed to recuse himself from, but didn't. But anyway, but that's what it's about, not about their gifts or the secret trip to Russia that Clarence Thomas apparently took.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about any of that. So that's interesting to me, because I don't know that not recusing yourself is a crime, and impeachment is about crimes, right? High crimes and misdemeanors.
Yeah, the other stuff is ethics related for the
right.
most part.
They are unbelievably unethical. There's no doubt about that. I don't know that impeachment handles ethics though, but whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right in the high crimes and misdemeanors assessment of the process of impeachment. So that's why those things are probably not in there. But like you said, it's symbolic, and I assume that some groups are putting enough pressure on political bodies to do something, and unfortunately, the do something part really amounts to just slacktivism, because they know, like Cortez knows, that this isn't going to go anywhere. And if nobody else jumped on the bandwagon with her, I think that's probably the most useful aspect of this, is if she introduced a bill for articles of impeachment to be drawn up against Supreme Court justices, other politicians have the opportunity to co-sponsor that, like any other bill. And if nobody else did, there's a useful exercise in that, in terms of not even being willing to participate in something that is purely symbolic, that would never go any further than the floor of the House.
You know what I was just thinking? Did she use the not recusing yourself thing as the thing just because it's symbolic, in the hopes that after November there'll be enough Democrats in the House to actually impeach them for actual crimes? So maybe she didn't use the actual crimes because she knows this one's going nowhere.
And you think if there's enough but that's my point, is that she is standing alone in her slacktivism in introducing this. And even if there's more Democrats in the House in November or in January after, inauguration and so forth, what difference does it make? Because none of the other existing Democrats, who may not even be up for re-election, would even participate in this. So what difference is a handful of other Democrats going to make? I mean,
the entire House is up for re-election every election, so they are all up for re-election.
Oh, okay. But nobody participated with her on this bill in her current colleagues.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why she did it. It's not going to go anywhere, but I don't know. It's kind of like something that Marjorie Taylor Greene does. She introduced articles of impeachment against Biden several times.
Yeah, and only her little cabal would give her lip service on it and whatever. But I don't know. I struggle, because, as I said, nobody else had the wherewithal to bring this up, and anybody, could have done this and could have participated in it, and as a second, third person on that bringing that bill to the floor, and nobody did. So I struggle with giving her kudos for doing this. But the option would have been to not do it, because it was doomed to not go anywhere. So is that really the choice you make in those situations? If there is a morally right thing to do you do it even though you know it's not going to come to fruition? And does that deserve a pat on the back?
I don't know. I'm of the mind, and actually this is going to be a little tangent, something else I'm going to talk about. But I don't like politicians doing performative things, and I want them to do actual things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what this makes me think about, I don't know if you saw, but New York City is going to use trash cans now. I didn't know they didn't use trash cans.
Saw that.
But if you watch the video of Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, having his press conference introducing the trash can to New Yorkers, you can see tape on the ground showing him where the trash can goes when he rolls it in.
Jesus
and
Christ.
I'm just like, the whole thing's a performance.
Yeah.
And like, he rehearsed it and everything. It's all a performance. None of it's real.
Mm-hmm.
None of our politicians are real. They're all performing.
Yep.
And I don't know, that's just so disappointing to me. I mean, they do real stuff sometimes, but they spend an awful lot of time performing.
That's what I want to know, because one of my things that I have understood for a while, so hold on a second, my wires are getting tangled up here, is that there are freshman senators that come in when they get elected. And my understanding is that the freshman senators are tasked by the senior members to do projects, to support bills, and to do certain things. And if they don't agree with the bills that they're being asked to support, or the legislation they're being asked to support, then they are stuck in literal closets on phone banks all day long doing fundraising for the party. And I think they do that to some degree also. So if we look for fresh meat to come into the political system with an agenda for change, the party beats them down. It doesn't matter which party it is. They both parties do this. You talk about a young freshman senator that, is motivated for change and campaigned on doing things to bring significant change to the political process and so on and so forth. Once they get into office, the party beats them down unless they can fall in line with what the party bosses want them to do. And so how does anything change when the party is averse to changing anything?
You're 100% right. And that's actually that line of thought right there is going to tie in when I talk about what I talked to Jim Wertz about later. We're not going to skip ahead to Jim Wertz. Just put a pin in that.
Yep.
The party beating you down.
Yep.
Because I did talk to him about that in Pennsylvania terms, but we'll get there. All right. Europe elections. So we talked about last week about how Great Britain sent the far right packing, but how the far right had gained power in France. Now, I don't understand how the French election system works, but they had another vote, a second round of voting. I don't really know what that's about. And in that second round of voting, the far right did not gain anywhere near as much power. The centrist government of Macron formed a coalition with the further left parties in France, and told their people to all vote together against the far right, and they did. So that's good news, I think. James must have got a phone call or something.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
There we go. I got muted somehow. So my takeaway from this when I saw it on the outline was exactly what you said when you started talking about this, is that I apparently don't know fuck all about how the elections in France work. Because the first news that we saw coming out of the elections was that the right had taken over everything.
Right.
And then I started hearing about this round of elections, and I'm like, what does that even mean?
I don't know. I don't know.
But I did see the video of the reactions from people that were involved in the political parties as they were watching that second round of stuff come in, and it was pretty hilarious.
Yeah. Now I will tell you, Marine Le Pen, the leader of the far right in France, she claimed a lot of victory on Twitter. She's on Twitter. She's on TikTok too, and I happened to see both of those. And she claimed victory after that first round.
Yep.
But obviously it was not really a victory. I don't know if it doesn't seem like it's like primaries and then
No, but
general election like we had.
she did win her seat. It's just that she doesn't have her party to support her. Her party didn't win the majority.
Right.
So she's an ineffectual leader. She's kind of neutered. She's not going to be able to do anything.
Well, that's too bad.
Well, yeah, I feel terrible for her. Jesus Christ. Oh, so it did pique my interest. I'm going to look into more about how the voting system works, and I'm assuming, I don't know if France is, and that's the other thing too, is I don't know with the European Union if that required countries to bring their electoral processes into a common ground and do it all the same way. If they're all like still running their own systems that are vastly different from each other, but I'm definitely going to educate myself more on that.
I did learn something from TikTok about how Great Britain does their government. I knew there was a House of Lords and House of Commons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the House of Lords being sort of like the Senate and the House of Commons being sort of like the House. What I didn't know, nobody elects the people in the House of Lords. They're appointed by the king.
By the king?
Yes, and they can be inherited. Like you can have, and they're for life.
Wow.
They're lifelong appointments, and they can be inherited.
Wow.
So they are literally lords. Like,
that's fucking crazy.
That is so terrible.
And they have a significant amount of power over legislation and policy and things, I assume.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
It is crazy.
Ugh. Well,
so I'm just looking at a push notification. Donald Trump is safe after being rushed off. Yeah, all right.
Fuck.
But yeah, so that's crazy. I don't know how I feel about that. Could you imagine? I mean, honestly, though, it's not that different here. Yes, they do get voted, but they do, politics runs in families. Senate seats run in families. I know there's been a handful of times where a senator or somebody had died and their wife ended up taking their seat. That's
Gabby Gifford.
Yeah, that's right. Her husband took her seat.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah, the whole you then begin branching off into the whole idea of nepotism in politics. I mean, direct nepotism, and Trump was the greatest example of that, hiring all of his children to do fucking, international policy and domestic policy shit. That should be, out of just a sense of common fucking sense, that should be illegal. It should not be allowed. It's fucking ridiculous.
Oh, and let's not talk about the Democratic Party and how they decide who they're putting up for president like it's their turn. Remember?
Oh, absolutely. It
was Hillary's turn, so they had the party who Bernie Sanders is a member of actively supported his opponent in the primary. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The primary should be open to any member of the party, and the party itself should be neutral until one of them wins, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's a big boys, club, and if you don't pay your dues, you're not going to get to play. And I saw an article today, and it was posted on TikTok, and I commented on it, where Bernie Sanders is saying that the left should just pull it together and get over it, that Biden is going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. I said, fine, fuck my vote then. My vote is obviously not going to the Democratic Party. And by the way, and for you fucking lunatics that are out there saying, you're voting for Trump. No, I'm not fucking voting for Trump either, you dipshits. There are other options on the table. And
until all of you start believing that, it is always going to be a two-party system.
Yeah, we've talked about this so many times. We've touched on it. We can't really arrive at a reasonable solution for this, but how we get away from this two-party system is beyond me. I don't know how this is done. I don't even, I think the nearest thing that I think has the potential to bring the biggest shift in this around is the interstate compact agreement regarding the electoral college. And if we can get enough states to be signatories to this, and we're pretty close to the number that are needed, that would begin breaking the two-party system. I don't know how many more states are needed. It's like fewer than 10 more to possess enough votes, popular votes, that would override the electoral college votes. But once that happens, that'll be the first chip in the armor of the two-party system.
Yeah, I say you get rid of primaries, get rid of parties controlling elections. The federal government should run the federal elections. Every candidate that gets enough support through petitioning or whatever gets the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have 2 people on the ballot. You have 12, and you do ranked choice voting.
Yes, ranked choice voting for sure. I mean, there are states.
I don't know how we get that done.
Well, there are states that
see.
There are states that do that currently. Alaska is one that uses ranked choice voting, and there are others. So it's not an unknown concept in American politics. Granted, it's a local thing, but it's
right. But how do you get the Democrats and Republicans who just alternate power on a federal level to implement that federally?
Yeah, you're right.
Because it will diminish their power.
Yep. Yep.
So. All right, we were going to talk about how Nikki Haley was not invited to the convention despite telling her 97 delegates to vote for Trump. But you sent me the link to an article that apparently she has, just 2 days before the convention, been invited to the convention.
Yeah.
So do you think there was backlash on not inviting her? And that's why she got invited? Or I don't know.
I don't know, because she committed those delegates of hers before she was informed or before she became aware that she was not invited, or did she commit those delegates even after?
No, she committed the delegates weeks ago.
Yeah, okay.
And see, I don't know that you can be like positively not invited. She just wasn't invited. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she wasn't on the list of speakers.
Right.
Maybe she threatened to pull back her delegates and push them towards someone else, like RFK.
Well, you're right, because it was her camp that, made it public that she had not been invited, and that was just last week. So maybe that's why maybe that's what Trump and his camp were worried about. Not that he needs her delegates, he doesn't.
Right.
But maybe he needs her voters. You don't want her voters staying home or gasp voting for Biden.
Yeah, I think her voters would be probably less likely to vote for Biden and instead vote for Kennedy.
Yeah.
That's just my assumption. But she's going to be there speaking and saying whatever the fuck it is that she needs to say, which is going to be fascinating. We're
going to find out who Trump's VP pick is on Monday, too.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Who
do you think it's going to be?
I don't know. Some fascist asshole.
I know it's not, because I saw a news article before I knew that she wasn't invited to speak at the convention. I saw a news article that said she was decisively not going to be.
Yeah.
On the list to be picked. I've seen Vivek Ramaswamy on the list. I can't think of who else I've seen that is likely to be.
Yeah. I don't know, but I don't know that whoever it is even knows yet. That's what's funny. Like, Trump didn't even tell who it is. He's just gonna name somebody at the convention. I bet you. It is so bizarre.
It's gonna be whoever can stimulate his or express his anal glands effectively and get him off. That's gonna be his pick. I know, that's disgusting.
Yeah, what the fuck, James?
Man, that's what it is. That's what they're doing. I guarantee you, and symbolically as much, but it's about who can jerk him off to completion. That's how it's always been.
All right.
By the way, we can stream this Google Meet live on YouTube. We're going to do that next time. I just discovered that.
Okay. All right. Next, we're going to talk about Biden. All right. First of all, more donors have pulled their money. More senators and House members of the House have called on him to step aside. And Blue MAGA is very mad at some celebrities who said he should step aside. Stephen King, George Clooney.
Mm-hmm.
There's a handful, but Blue MAGA is very mad, big mad. It is crazy how much of a cult they have become.
Oh yeah,
it is insane. And the fact that they keep defending his cognitive ability, like they don't care. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people that I've probably followed during the between 2016 and 2020. I was following everybody on Twitter that was anti-Trump pretty much at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of them now are saying things like, it doesn't really matter if his cognitive abilities are declined because he surrounds himself with so many good people. Well, so could someone else. You know what I mean?
Right.
That argument makes no sense.
No, and I've never seen that argument with the qualifier that was the second part of what you said, where because he surrounds himself with so and so. I have seen the argument of, I don't care how declined he is. If he was dead, I would still vote for him. Or if he was Satan incarnate, I would still vote for him. And that's just pathetic on a level that is equal to any MAGA that's going to say the same thing about Trump.
It is. It's wild. By the way, Biden has started to sound like Trump. He's bragging about how big his crowds are. I don't know. I don't even know what to say. But okay, so he gave a press conference during a NATO summit.
Yep.
And during that press conference, he was introducing President Zelensky of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And he introduced him as President Putin. Now, he did catch himself on that one and said, no, I mean Zelensky, we're going to beat Putin. So he caught himself. Look, slips like that can happen. I understand.
Yeah.
But then he went on to name Vice President Kamala Harris Vice President Trump.
Yes.
And he didn't catch himself there. He just went with it.
I
don't even know how that happens. First of all, Trump was never a vice president. So the words vice president and Trump shouldn't flow together like that, Oh
my God.
I don't know.
I saw the aftermath of the Zelensky faux pas, and the press, of course, was just hammering it. And they were interviewing Zelensky in a press conference afterward, and they said, what's your take on President Biden calling you President Putin and blah, blah, blah. And Zelensky just looked at the reporter like, really, what's wrong with you? And he said, plain and simple, it was a mistake. Yeah. It was a mistake. And he just thought it was ridiculous that these people were hounding him about that, and like it was going to upset the apple cart in some way. But yeah, and then the Kamala Harris thing. Has anybody talked? Has Harris said anything about this?
Not that I'm aware of. That's the thing I don't understand. People are talking about her being the candidate, or that they want her to be the candidate, and I never hear anything about her.
Yeah.
I don't know what she's done as vice president. I used to see her a lot when she was in the Senate. She was very visible.
Mm-hmm.
But as vice president, she's not visible at all.
No. And I think there's some intentionality to that, because early on in their term, she said and did some stupid things that made her look questionable in terms of her qualifications. And at the same time, when they came into office, there was still a great fire under ACAB and Black Lives Matter and so forth. And her history as a prosecutor, I think it was in a Houston district, came up, and the her absolute affinity for law enforcement and blue lives and all that other bullshit was part of the picture too. When defund the police was popular and had some momentum, she stood up against that as though that was the right thing to do.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, polls do show her that she can beat Trump, and the current polls show that Biden cannot.
Really? I haven't seen that.
Well, I say current, but I really mean several days ago. So you know how fast that stuff can change, and it does depend on who's doing the polling.
True.
But yeah, but that's something that Biden's camp isn't telling him. They're not telling him the truth, because he said during that press conference at the NATO summit that there are no polls that show he can't win, but there actually is. So they're not telling him the truth.
So you think this is, and I've assumed this myself as well, that this is like the emperor's new clothes, that they keep him from all the bad press and only bolster his ego with.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
I'm
fascinated. Well, I'm fascinated by what you said were any of the polls that show that Harris could beat Trump, because I think at this point, I don't know, maybe, see, here's the thing. If you get Harris into a debate stage with Trump, I don't know how well she performs. She didn't do really well back when she did her vice presidential debate, because I think there was still only one when she debated Pence. But I don't think she did very well. I don't
remember that, but I do remember her being pretty good at questioning people that were testifying in committee when she was in the Senate.
Yeah, I do too.
She was good at that.
Yeah. So maybe they're waiting until there's no possibility. Like maybe Biden will pull out at the last minute when there's no possibility of arranging a debate between Trump and Harris, because I think that probably bodes better for her than to get her into it on a debate stage with Trump, because I don't have a lot of confidence in how she would. I don't know how she would deal with that. But like you said,
again, I don't like how it's just her turn. Like, why is it just her turn?
Yeah.
I don't get it. But anyway, I will say Biden did say something, and I don't know if it was at that NATO press conference or at another one, but he said that Kamala would be a good president and that she can beat Trump. And then he said a number of other people could beat him too. So he's acknowledging that he's not the only one, or he did to that one reporter who asked the question. So that's kind of interesting, because he had previously said that he was the only one. You know, he was saying, I'm the only one who's ever beaten him, I think was the words he used a couple weeks ago. And he changed that a little bit. So
yeah, but at the same time, this is still, this has always felt this way to me, that Biden was anointed by the DNC with no challenger, apparent on the horizon to usurp him, that Biden is treating this as though he's entitled to this.
Right.
And I saw a story, again, I couldn't tell you where the story's source was, but it was a news story that was saying that Jill Biden is like coercing him to stay in the race, and apparently she's younger than him, because they're calling it elder abuse. That that was the headline.
Look, I don't remember who it was. I think it was a senator that was talking on TV, and he said that Biden could walk away and be hailed as a hero for all he accomplished in the last 4 years, but if he stays on and loses, he will forever be remembered as bad. And that's true.
Well, yeah, not only that, but I've thought about, you remember how Trump didn't attend Biden's inauguration, and I called that, by the way. I said months before that Trump's not going to show up at Biden's, and I was right, because I'm always fucking right, apparently. If Trump wins, do you think Biden's going to stand there on that stage and shake his hand and just participate in Trump's dog and pony show? I don't think he would.
I think he will.
Really?
Yes, he will. Of course he will.
How humiliating would that be?
Of course he will. And he should. And Trump should have too. But whatever. But I do want to point out, Biden is since the debate, he's been giving press conferences and going on TV shows as much as he can, trying to prove that he's all there. And I feel like he's doing the opposite.
Yeah.
But people are paying attention. 25 million people watched that press conference at the NATO summit. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. People are paying attention. So
is that 25 million in the United States only?
That I don't know.
because it may have been other countries too. So
True, but other countries are invested in this because they don't want Trump either.
Well, right, but other countries don't get to vote in our elections. So if we're looking at this as a measurement of Biden's potential to win, I'm not sure.
I don't know, but do you think that if some heads of state from European countries tell Biden to step down, that doesn't hold some sway? I think it probably does.
I think that they would only do that if they knew that this is going to come back to the DNC, because it's going to fall on the DNC to put somebody in his place. It would depend on who the DNC designates to fill his space. That NATO countries and European countries are going to say, okay, yes, we can work with this person. Because and let this tie into Ukraine and situation in Ukraine, because I really wonder at this point how concerned European countries and specifically NATO countries are about the idea that Trump could be elected again, and what that means for NATO and what that means for Ukraine. Because I think if Trump does get elected again, Ukraine is done. Ukraine is Russia at that point.
Well, Trump has said repeatedly that one of the first things he'll do is pull us out of NATO.
Well, so come back then to the present day, and I really expected to begin to see very soon a shift in strategy. And yes, there has been a gradual shift in what Ukraine has been allowed to do with NATO weapons it's received. But I think that I really have to believe that in the minds of the leaders of NATO countries and military leadership in those countries and so forth, that they really want to see Ukraine beat down Russia decisively.
They do. And in fact, Macron in particular has said he would be willing to put French troops in Ukraine right now.
Yeah. Well, he qualified that, though. He's still calling them trainers. But
doesn't matter. One of them gets shot. One of them gets hit with a cruise missile.
What do you do? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and then on top of that, the new alliance between Russia and North Korea. North Korea has apparently stated they're going to put troops in Ukraine to fight Ukrainians. Where in the fuck does that go? Because if they do that, North Korean troops are going to get killed. And what is North Korea's response to that going to be? It blows my mind that they would put North Korean troops in Ukraine.
Well, that's why people think that this is the beginnings of World War III, and it could be. I don't know.
They've been saying that since day one of this now 2-year war of attrition that is going on over there. I don't know.
All right, since we're talking about it, you want to talk about the Children's Cancer Hospital that Putin blew up with a cruise missile?
Yeah,
about that.
It was as blatant as could be. There's footage of it. There was initial stories that it was some hypersonic missile. It was not a hypersonic missile. It was just a very basic cruise missile that directly targeted this children's cancer hospital. And then the photos that exist of the immediate aftermath are just, it is what you expect it to be, but it was directly targeted. And it was directly, I think it was a retaliatory, I think it was a retaliatory strike for Ukraine. And I don't know why Ukraine hit that space research facility in Crimea that's owned by Russia. It seemed like a really weird target to pick, unless they had intelligence that Russia was using those satellite dishes to enhance their war against Ukraine and missile guidance and so forth. But that was a big hit to the science community. So I felt like the Russian cruise missile on the children's hospital was a retaliatory for Ukraine hitting that radar installation in Ukraine that was in Crimea that was owned by Russia. I don't know.
So what is the exchange rate on satellite dishes and children with cancer? What's the
How many?
What's the going exchange rate on that?
Oh my
Jesus
God.
Christ. Well, you know who else likes to bomb hospitals?
Oh yeah, fucking
Israel does.
Israel likes to bomb all the things that aren't
hospitals, schools. Yeah.
Yeah,
one thing that's not on this list that I want to bring up is Netanyahu has Biden's peace proposal included that Palestinians would all be allowed to return to Gaza. Netanyahu had agreed to that originally, but now he says, no, if you fought against us ever, you can't go back. So that's going to be a sticking point, and that peace is not going to happen.
I don't know how, and I don't know the rest of the details of what the negotiations are between Hamas and Israel, but if there isn't something in there about the borders of Gaza being secured for Gaza and the utilities and the ability to travel and the ability to import and export their own goods isn't taken out from under the thumb of Israel, the best case scenario at that point is that Gaza goes back to being what it was on October 5th and 6th.
Giant open air prison.
Yes, exactly. So that we're haggling over who can go back to Gaza after all this is over is disgusting, because if there isn't a drastic change in what defines Gaza and how Gaza can function independently, and other countries could invest in Gaza, they could invest in infrastructure for the Gazans and get Israel completely the fuck out of there. But at this point, Israel has secured its future as being a hated, despised, legitimate target of retribution for Palestinians. They have cemented their place in history as being a perpetual target for generations to come, as have countries who have supported Israel in this destruction of Palestinian territories, including in the West Bank. That they deserve no peace and they will get no peace. And I don't understand how they think that there's going to be a future for Gaza or a future for Israel or a future of real security for anybody because of how this was executed and carried out. It blows my fucking mind.
I'm going to blow your mind again.
Go for it.
All right. Reagan is a piece of shit. He's responsible for a lot of our problems today. But I read an excerpt with some quotes from Reagan when Israel was bombing Lebanon. I don't remember when exactly, 1980 something.
Mm-hmm.
Reagan was president. And Reagan called the Israeli prime minister, maybe it was Menachem Begin, I don't remember, and told him that it was a Holocaust that they were doing after they bombed Lebanon for 10 straight hours. Reagan called him and told him, that's a Holocaust. You got to stop. And the response from the Israeli prime minister was, I know what a Holocaust is, and this isn't it. And they kept bombing them. But then an hour later, Reagan got the call back because he had threatened to withhold dollars. He got the call back, and they said, okay, we'll stop bombing.
That's always been all it would take, is for the
Biden could do that too.
Yeah, the material support to the nation of Israel is what keeps its ability and its hubris in carrying out the things that's carried out for generations. My wife and I will.
How the fuck did Darth Reagan notice that 10 hours of bombing was a Holocaust, and Biden can't notice it after several months of bombing?
Yeah. And the death toll is in the current campaign fucking dwarfs whatever the death toll was in Lebanon during that time as well.
The Lancet, which is a medical journal, they say that there could be as many as 186,000 dead Palestinians since October 7th from this. Because they've stopped reporting because the Palestinians that were counting the dead are dead themselves now.
Yep. So
they can't count.
Yeah, and
so
the rate at which
30,000 for months now.
The rate at which deaths are continuing, not at the end of a gun, but through starvation and disease,
right,
as a direct result of the decimation of every living thing in Palestine is just continuing and ongoing. My wife and I were watching a movie last night. It doesn't matter what the movie was, but in the movie it references the Munich hijacking from whatever that was, 1973 or something, where the Olympics, Olympic countries, there were some that were hijacked by what was called the People's Liberation, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1973. And they were fighting the same thing that we're fighting today. This is generations long.
Mm-hmm.
And it just blew my mind, because I know for a fact that there are younger people today that are just waking up to what's going on in Palestine, and they may think as of today that this didn't start until October 8th, that what we're seeing on the ground, and it doesn't take much to educate yourself and learn that this has been going on for generations, and it could stop simply by the U.S. stopping to support Israel.
Yep.
And I don't see it happening. I don't know. It's all disgusting.
It is. But it absolutely is a genocide. I want to make that clear.
100%. 100%.
All right. Last night, Friday, July 12th, I was at a baseball game. It was a union event. A bunch of union members got tickets to go see our AA baseball team play. And it was put together by Jim Wertz, who's running for Pennsylvania State Senate. And I got to talk to him for a little bit while he was waiting for a different reporter to interview him. I pretended to be a reporter and asked him some questions. So yeah, I asked him how important, if he felt that turnout was important to him winning, because we know Democrats do better when more people vote. And what I found interesting, first of all, he acknowledged that was true. And then I said, so what are you doing to increase turnout? And his answer was different than what you probably would have got a few years ago. He said his campaign is not driving anyone to the polls in November, but they are driving people with mail-in ballots to drop off their mail-in ballot in the weeks leading up to the election. And his argument was more people are voting mail-in now, and we can drive with the limited amount of drivers they have, because they can drive people to drop off their mail-in ballots for weeks. They can do a lot more than just driving people to the polls. And I found that interesting. That's a change in what you would expect. The other thing I asked him was about, in Pennsylvania, I think I've talked about this before, but our elected officials in our assembly are basically allowed to be bribed. It's perfectly legal, and it happens. They get trips, they get cars, they get vacations, they get all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him about that. First of all, he misunderstood me and thought I was talking about money and politics. And his answer there was interesting as well, because he said, well, as long as he got kind of defensive and said, well, as long as the other guy is taking big donations from everywhere, I have to too. I have to play by the same rules, or else I'll fall behind. That's not what I was asking him, but it was interesting that he said that.
Well, repeat for me what it was you were actually asking him, though.
I was asking him, there has been numerous times a proposed, they call it a gift ban, banning gifts for elected officials in the Pennsylvania State Assembly. Mm-hmm. Because right now they're allowed to accept gifts, and they do. And the gifts are bribes, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask him about that, but I didn't use the word gift ban because I had a couple drinks. I couldn't come up with the word gift ban. So I said, whatever I said, he misunderstood and thought I was talking about whatever, but he did support campaign finance reform. He did say that. But then when I acknowledged that it was the gift ban, he said he didn't know that much about it, but he does think it's something worth looking at. And I pointed out to him that there is an account on TikTok that I follow whose it's a young man, and his whole existence is trying to get the gift ban passed in Pennsylvania. He lives in Harrisburg. He goes to the assembly when they're in session all the time and tries to lobby assembly people to get them to pass a gift ban. But one time he talked about a new senator that had just been elected and how he was going to introduce the bill that was going to, put the gift ban up for a vote. And then he said when that senator got talked to by his party leader, Democrat party leader, when he actually got in the Senate, this is what I'm talking about, your party beating you down. He was told that was a non-starter. It would never pass. And introducing the bill would lose him support in other bills that he wanted to do. So he shouldn't do that.
Wow.
And I find that shocking. So Jim Wertz, who, if he's elected, will be a brand new assemblyman, brand new senator, he might go in there thinking he's going to pass the gift ban, but then he's going to get a talking to, and maybe he won't.
Or pass anything that he decides is useful in his campaign to get himself elected. And I guess I would, like you said, he wasn't versed on the gift ban directly, but he's got to have other, because I looked at his campaign page where it talks about he's endorsed by Planned Parenthood and so forth. So I'm assuming somewhere at some point he's talked about the things that he thinks need to be done or that he plans to do. And I wonder what those things are. And I wonder how those things are going to rub up negatively against the party bosses that are going to, as you just said, shoot him down on those things, and how he's going to respond to that. And that is, I can't imagine he's coming into this wearing rose-colored glasses where he's not, he's just idyllic and he's ambitious and doesn't understand how the politics of it is going to work if he gets elected. Right. So I wonder what his plan is to counter that, if that's what gets dropped on him.
Based on his fact that he acknowledged he didn't know that much about it, I'm 100% going to say that's probably not the most important thing. And I get it. It isn't really. There's plenty of problems. That's not the most important thing facing the state of Pennsylvania or the United States of America right now, that, some assembly people in Pennsylvania take bribes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't in the forefront of his mind because he cares more about other things like abortion access, things like that. And that makes sense. I get it. I do want to say, I did know Jim Wertz. I didn't really know who he was, but I've gotten his mailers and stuff. But when I first saw him was somebody I follow on TikTok. I don't know if you follow him. His name's Ender. I don't know where he lives, but he collects figurines and he's a mental health advocate. Mm-hmm. He had reposted this video of Jim Wertz walking through a neighborhood here in Erie and coming across an old man that wanted to complain to him that his neighborhood was being taken over by immigrants, specifically Nepalese immigrants. And the way Jim handled it was incredible. Mm. He did not get angry. He did not argue. He just explained. He said, "Oh, I know some of these families and I can try to explain to you what's really going on." And he talked to him with respect and very calmly and explained the situation. And I feel like he kind of changed that guy's thoughts on it a little bit. Mm. So that's what impressed me about him, and I told him when I met him last night about that video, and I told him, I said, "You handled that way differently than I would have."
Yeah. And I've said that repeatedly, and I don't know how much difference really happens for the most part in taking a Socratic method in responding to these lunatics who have these bizarre ideas about what's really going on in the world, to sit and teach them in a different way than I'm inclined to do, because I'm inclined to use a machete and flamethrower on them at every turn. And
Me too.
I have a hard time pulling myself back from that.
Allegedly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there are those that are more amenable to a Socratic approach, and those that simply won't.
Yeah, well, what he actually said was, I actually know some of these families. The guy was complaining that houses were being bought by Nepalese people, and that there were like a lot of them living in one house, and then they would buy another house, and some of them would move to the other house or whatever.
Mhm.
And what Jim explained to him, which this is something I didn't know, and it's interesting, was that community, what they do is they pool all their money together, and there's a hierarchy. Once they have enough money to buy a house, they buy a house for whoever's turn it is to get a house.
Mhm.
And then they have that house, that family moves in, and then they keep pooling their money until they have enough money to buy another house. And then whoever's next, that family gets that house. And that's what they do. And that's very socialist, and
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that reminds me, I was driving Uber the other day and I picked up this guy who decided he was going to start bitching about immigrants and politics and things like that. And he was talking about the way that immigrants are skewing the census situation in terms of, counting people. Is that he was saying that, well, because he was from down in Brownsville, Texas, where I used to live. And he's saying that, well, they'll have 15 members of an extended family living under the same roof in a 4-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house that isn't designed for 15 people. And so they aren't, when a census is done, they aren't being counted correctly. And because they're exceeding the occupancy of the house. And he was bitching about how that destroys the infrastructure of, what the tax base is and so forth and so on. But
Right. First of all, I don't think that's true. How many people live in the house is what they count, not how many people are supposed to live in the house. I guess maybe I didn't understand what his argument was. But if 15 people live in the house, the census will say 15 people lived in the house.
oh, hang on. I've got live updates on the Trump, Pennsylvania. 2 killed at the Trump shooting. 2 people have been killed. 2 people have been killed at a Donald Trump rally in Pennsylvania, including the person who fired the shots. Trump was seen with blood on his face. Stage safety. Yeah. Yep. It's looking like the Secret Service may have shot. There's a shooting West off stage. He's fine. Reports Merrill Cornfield told the authorities Mr. Trump was grazed by gunfire. The shooter is dead. The venue's been evacuated. Looking for a clearer picture.
Interesting.
Wow. Well, I had a feeling we'd get more developments on it and more clarity before we reach the end of our agenda here.
And you were right, because you're always fucking right.
There you go. You're catching on. See how this works? It's the cross-eyed bear, man. It's a burden.
All right. Today's the day that my secret obsession with true crime and real life court drama is going to tie into our podcast. Okay.
Yep.
So we've talked about the Karen Reed trial before. Now, since last week, the lead investigator had been suspended with pay. He had a hearing, and at the end of the hearing, they took away his pay. Still suspended, but now he doesn't get paid. Nobody really knows what that's all about because it's behind closed doors. They just know the result. But what also has happened is that at this time that we're recording this, 4 jurors, so a quarter of the jury, has come forward and told the defense lawyers that they had acquitted her of second-degree murder, but they were hung on involuntary manslaughter. So the defense now wants the judge to rule that she was acquitted on the most serious charges. And so that's what's going on. So there's going to be a hearing about that in the coming weeks.
Okay.
All right. But we've already talked about in that case how the police bungled the investigation, very much made it look like they were trying to frame her. Whether they were actually trying to frame her or not, it really looks like they were trying to. So that's a problem with the police, right? Well, Alec Baldwin, his trial that started this week, where he was on trial for involuntary manslaughter,
yeah,
in the shooting on the set of his movie Rust. Yesterday, that case got dismissed with prejudice by the judge because of prosecutorial and police misconduct. The prosecutors and the police allegedly colluded to hide evidence from the defense. And the judge found out about it and dismissed the case. So my thoughts on this are, we've got two very public cases, and you can throw the Young Thug trial in there too, where the judge and the prosecutor colluded to incite a witness who had wanted to plead the Fifth Amendment, exercise his Fifth Amendment rights. They convinced him not to by threatening him with years of jail time if he didn't. And they did that in judges' chambers with the defense not present. And then the judge was really mad that the defense lawyers had found out about it and threatened to throw the defense lawyer in jail. And that whole thing went crazy. And now that judge is being investigated. So 3 cases that are public because they're famous, right? Mm-hmm. And in all 3 of them, prosecutors, judges, police are all acting badly.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about how often that happens to your neighbor or, your average person that gets charged with any crime. How often, if they're doing it in these extremely high profile cases, they're doing it in other cases.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, tie right into this, there was a news story that came up in our local paper yesterday. You remember the situation down here where, well, there was 2 of them. There was an acorn that fell from the tree, and this cop who had somebody pulled over. Yeah, he thought it was gunshots. He starts firing his gun, and he got fired after that. And then there was the kid who was an airman at the base that I work on, who answered his door when somebody at the apartment said there was something going on. He had a gun in his hand as he opened the door, and the gun was pointed down at the ground, and the Okaloosa County Sheriff's deputy fucking shot and killed him, and he's been fired. Well, just yesterday, there was another Okaloosa County Sheriff deputy who was arrested and fired because he was found tampering with evidence. So absolutely, this is systemic. There needs to be a massive DOJ investigation into, and I think that's what, in my local situation, Okaloosa County is scrambling to keep the DOJ from investigating them because they have now so many instances of police misconduct that is apparently just, routine procedure. They're scrambling to avoid a DOJ investigation, but there apparently needs to be one in a lot of places.
I would love for everyone who listens to this to try, if you can, to pay attention to what's going on in the courthouses in your town and just call it out if you get wind of any of this kind of stuff happening, because court TV is not in every courtroom.
True.
And if they're doing it in the trials that are on court TV, somebody's got to be watching these other trials. I don't know. I don't even know what to. I mean, I am certain there are good judges that will call this shit out in their own courtroom, like the judge in the Alec Baldwin case did. I should also point out, one of the prosecutors prosecuting the case resigned Friday, right, because they had after the judge found out about this evidence, and the prosecutor that wasn't the primary prosecutor found out about it too. She told the main prosecutor, you have to drop this case now. You have to drop the charges because this is wrong.
Yeah. And
when the lead prosecutor declined to drop the charges, this other prosecutor resigned. So they came back from this break, and the defense lawyer, the prosecutor ended up being on the stand testifying.
Mm-hmm.
And because the defense filed a motion to dismiss based on this, and the prosecutor was on the stand, and the defense lawyer said, didn't so-and-so, your other prosecutor, didn't she resign? Yes. she had just resigned like minutes earlier.
Wow.
Over this, and the lead prosecutor didn't care, was going to go on. Well, anyway, the judge said that it was gross misconduct by the police and the prosecutor, and she had no choice but to dismiss the charges with prejudice, meaning you can't refile them. So,
oh, wait a minute. So So the DA's intent to retry this is null and void?
Yeah, so when a judge dismisses the case, I remember this from the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because that judge dismissed the charges with prejudice too. And when they say with prejudice, that means you can't refile it. If they say without prejudice, you can refile them.
Okay, so there is no chance that the prosecutor is going to be able to refile this.
Correct.
Good.
It's a done deal. So, but yeah, that's alarming to me. I don't remember who it was, but somebody famous in history said they'd rather let 100 guilty men go free than let one innocent person rot in prison. Well, a lot more than one innocent person is rotting in prison right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have Project Innocence that is designed to find these people and get them back on their feet in their life again. But
yep, it happens far too often, and it's partially because police get promoted for closing cases. So if they can't figure out who really did it, they'll just figure out, who's close enough and make it work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And prosecutors get promoted by winning guilty verdicts. So they're going to try to do that even when they don't think it's right, because everybody is selfish. Even you and I, James.
Yeah.
Everybody is selfish.
I concede that. Yeah, I concede that completely.
Everybody is selfish, and that's why that happens. And
well, hold on. Let me ask you a question. Are you pro or opposed to the death penalty?
I am against it because I used to say there should be a higher, to get a guilty verdict, you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And I would say to get a death penalty verdict, you should have to prove it beyond any doubt.
Yeah.
But that's impossible.
Yeah. So
I'm more against. Plus, I think it's worse to rot in prison. Being an atheist, I don't feel like death is a punishment. Really, it's.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Agreed. Well, I think for those people that are still pro death penalty, I mean, you have to speak about it from a non-emotional perspective, because if you start talking about specific crimes and how the death penalty is warranted as a response to those crimes, and you can talk about some horrible crimes where there's an emotionally charged conversation, and yes, somebody who hurts children should definitely be eliminated. But when you have a justice system that is systemically, and this has been the argument from everybody I know that is anti-death penalty, is that you cannot establish, as you said, beyond any doubt whatsoever, first of all. But then when you have a justice system that is so corrupt and broken, and we see evidence of this all the time, how can you justify handing down a death sentence to anyone when you can't be certain that there was integrity to the investigation and the prosecution and so forth? So I think because just alone on that the system is so broken that we should not have the ability to sentence somebody to death.
I agree. Plus, I don't have a problem with being in prison as a punishment. That sounds pretty terrible to me, particularly American prisons. So
yeah, for sure.
That's a pretty bad punishment, and I'm fine with it.
I want to jump back to the top news of the hour, because it looks like of the two people that were killed, one was the shooter who was shot apparently by Secret Service. The other person was the person who took the bullet that was apparently intended for Trump, because it was a person that was standing behind Trump that is dead also from the bullet that was fired by the assailant.
Wow. So it grazed his ear and then hit somebody else.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm exercising restraint. I'm just reporting it. You people decide how you want to feel about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to say what I texted you.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't, and that's why I'm holding back as well. Yeah, I've got other stuff that I want to say, not specifically about this incident, but what I feel like we could be spiraling toward, and this could be a symptom of spiraling out of control. And
well, given how much Trump riles up his people to commit violence, and then knowing that someone committed violence against his people, I don't see how there's not retaliations all across the country, and I'm fearful for that.
Yep. Yep.
I am very fearful for that.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point. Oh.
All right. In memoriam, besides the Trump supporter who took one for Trump, we lost two good ones.
We lost Shelley Duvall, who has been in the entertainment industry forever and did things like The Shining. She was in the Robin Williams version of Popeye as Olive Oil. She's been in so many things, and she's passed away, I think, after a long illness. And Richard Simmons, the, for some, well-known fitness
Sweating to the 80s.
Yes, right. Passed away also. And,
so I know Richard Simmons' birthday was just a couple days ago. I follow him on Twitter, and he tweeted about his birthday and how he was so happy that he got so many birthday wishes. I don't know the circumstances surrounding his death. He was 76. But I don't know. Part of me is concerned because he was rumored to have mental health problems recently. So part of me is concerned about that. But Shelley Duvall, I know her mostly from The Shining. I've watched that movie numerous times. She also had a kids show that seemed to be very popular with some people. I was not aware of it. Like, I don't know, Princess Fairy or something. I don't know. Okay. But anyway, I did like her in The Shining. And I also recently saw her again on TikTok. I don't know if you know this, but a young person found her living alone and suffering from mental health problems and befriended her and put it on TikTok. I don't know if you saw that, but that was over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
She would visit, this young woman would go visit her almost daily and just, be her friend, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. They're listing her cause of death as complications from diabetes.
Yeah.
They're also listing at this point Richard Simmons' death as natural causes. So
yeah, I mean, he could have had a heart attack or whatever. I don't know that he was sick. It doesn't seem like it, but
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I like Richard Simmons and I like Shelley Duvall, and they will be missed.
Yeah. We don't need to lose any more good ones this year. Let's make sure more of the bad people expire on balance as opposed to the good ones. But if it's your time, it's your time. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
All right, dude. So we've run through the list, correct? Did we miss anything?
We have. This was a long one.
It was, wasn't it? I don't have with the Google Meet recording thing we're doing, I don't have like a timer that shows how long the recording is.
It's a little over an hour. Not too long, hopefully.
So next time we will stream it live on YouTube, and I need to find a way to upload these things to Twitch as well, but I'll put some TikTok clips of it up, and we will, any expectations on what we might be talking about next week?
Well, we're going to talk about the Republican convention for sure.
Oh yeah.
Because that's Monday, so that's happening right now as you're listening to this. Unless you're listening to this way in the future, in which case, hi. But yeah, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Biden more because he's going to be in more stuff. He's going to do more shows and do more pressers, and
yeah, and we'll know more about the Trump assassination attempt, and we'll have more news about that as well.
Yeah. All right, like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Leave us a review if you're listening on one of the podcast apps. That's about it. That's all I got.
Yay. Peace out, people. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.